Geneva Thompson, 32, daughter of powerful Senator Franklin Thompson, raised in elite DC circles with expectations to marry within our political class. Instead, I fell for Jake Harrison, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and an honest smile. When I announced our engagement, my father skipped my calls while my mother sobbed that my impulsive decision would ruin us all. They refused to attend our wedding. But one photo of Jake changed everything, sending my phone buzzing with their panicked calls. Want to know why? Let me tell you where I was watching from when this all started. If you are watching this story unfold, drop a comment letting me know which state you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for true love against all odds. I grew up in a world where appearances meant everything. Our Kalorama Heights mansion in Washington, D.C., stood as a monument to success, with its marble columns and manicured gardens designed for the sole purpose of impressing visitors. Every detail of our lives was carefully curated, from the artwork on our walls to the people we associated with. From my earliest memories, I understood that being Senator Thompson's daughter came with expectations that were non-negotiable. My father, Franklin Thompson, began his political career in state politics before clawing his way to becoming chairman of one of the Senate's most powerful committees. His life revolved around power connections and legacy. To him, family was just another strategic asset to be deployed when politically advantageous. Our appearances at his campaign events were meticulously staged with specific instructions on what to wear, what to say, and even how to smile. The warmth you might have seen in those family photos disappeared the moment cameras turned away. "Geneva, remember that the Patterson family will be at the gala tonight," he would say, while barely looking up from his briefing papers. Their son Gregory just made partner at his law firm. "Make sure to spend some time getting to know him better." It was never a suggestion, it was a directive. My mother Eleanor came from Georgetown society and treated social connections like military campaigns. As chairwoman of 3 exclusive charity boards, she wielded her social status with precision. She scrutinized every detail of my appearance whenever we went out in public. "Your hair looks unkempt," she would whisper, harshly smoothing a strand that had dared to escape its styling. "Senator Miller's wife just commented on how tired you look. Go refresh your makeup before anyone else notices." My education followed the expected path for someone of my standing. Georgetown Prep, where I was surrounded by children of diplomats and business magnates. Then Yale University for my undergraduate degree. Law school followed, though I had never wanted to be a lawyer. What I wanted never factored into the equation. After graduation, I managed to compromise by taking a position at a nonprofit that bridged policy work with community initiatives. Even this was barely tolerated by my parents, who had envisioned me at a prestigious law firm, or better yet, married to someone who could further my father's political connections. "The Whitfield Foundation is acceptable for now," my mother had said when I accepted the position. "Though I do hope you realize this is just a phase. Your father could have placed you at Harrington and Wells with one phone call." The men I dated followed a predictable pattern. Harold Winters, son of another senator, took me to the most exclusive restaurants, but could barely maintain a conversation that wasn't about himself. Lawrence Coleman, a corporate lawyer with the right pedigree, revealed his true nature when I saw him berating a waiter over a minor mistake. Then came James Porter, a hedge fund manager my father approved of, who I caught cheating with his assistant just 3 months into our relationship. With each failed relationship, my parents' control tightened. Sunday brunches became strategy sessions. The Richardson Gala next weekend would be perfect for meeting Bradley Wilson, my mother would say while delicately cutting her poached egg. His family's banking connections would be very useful to your father's campaign finance committee. My father would nod in agreement. "I've arranged for you to be seated at his table. Wear the blue dress, it photographs well." I would sit silently pushing food around my plate, feeling less like a daughter and more like a political pawn. My rebellion was quiet, but growing stronger with each passing day. I started to make small decisions for myself, changing my hair despite my mother's protests, volunteering at a community center in a neighborhood my parents would never visit, taking long drives alone to escape the suffocating expectations. Little did they know that one of those drives would change everything. When my Audi broke down on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Northeast DC in a part of town my parents had warned me never to visit. As the tow truck pulled away with me in the passenger seat, I had no idea I was heading toward the person who would help me break free from the golden cage I had lived in all my life. The breakdown happened on my way back from a community outreach meeting. My sleek Audi, usually so reliable, sputtered and died on a street I had only driven through, never stopped on. The rain was coming down in sheets, and my cell phone showed that expensive roadside assistance program my father insisted on would take over an hour to reach me. When a local tow truck offered help sooner, I accepted out of pure practicality. "Where should I take it?" the driver asked. "Wherever is closest and can fix it," I replied, not knowing this split-second decision would alter the course of my life. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to Harrison's auto shop. The building was unassuming, with a simple sign and 3 service bays. Nothing like the gleaming dealership where I usually took my car for maintenance. I stepped inside, the modest office designer heels clicking against the concrete floor, feeling immediately out of place in my tailored suit among the smell of motor oil and the sound of tools clanging in the background. That's when I first saw Jake Harrison. He wasn't what I expected. Tall with dark hair and focused eyes, he wiped his hands on a rag as he approached. Despite the grease stains on his work clothes, there was something immediately dignified about him. "Miss Thompson," he said, and I was surprised he recognized me. Most people did eventually, but it usually came with the fake smile and excessive friendliness that accompanied recognition of my father's political position. Jake showed none of that. "Your alternator's shot," he explained after examining my car, his voice straightforward. "Also found some issues with your timing belt that the dealership should have caught months ago." "How long will it take to fix?" I asked, already dreading calling my driver to pick me up. 3 hours for the alternator. The timing belt is another story. I can do it, but you might want the dealer to handle it since your car's still under warranty. I was struck by his honesty. Most mechanics I had encountered through friends' stories would have insisted on doing all the work themselves, charging premium rates. With 3 hours to kill and the rain still pouring, I settled into the small waiting area. Jake brought me a surprisingly good cup of coffee from a pot in the corner. "Mind if I ask what you do?" he said, noticing my briefcase and professional attire. "I work at the Whitfield Foundation," I replied, expecting the conversation to end there. "Environmental policy, right? I read about your water conservation initiative last month." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You follow environmental policy?" He smiled slightly. "I try to stay informed about things that matter." What began as small talk to pass the time evolved into one of the most stimulating conversations I'd had in months. Jake spoke knowledgeably about urban environmental challenges and shared innovative ideas about reducing emissions from older vehicles that low-income families couldn't afford to replace. "Most people think the only green solution is everyone buying electric cars," he explained while checking on my Audi's progress. "But the environmental cost of manufacturing new vehicles is massive. Sometimes the better approach is making existing cars more efficient." During those 3 hours, I learned that Jake was born and raised in Brooklyn, a working-class DC neighborhood. He had taught himself automotive repair from YouTube videos and community college courses while working full-time. The shop had been his uncle's, and Jake had taken over 5 years ago, when his uncle retired. "I like fixing things," he said simply. "At the end of the day, I can point to something that works because of what I did. Not everyone can say that about their job." When my car was finished, I found myself reluctant to leave. I paid the bill, which was surprisingly reasonable, and on impulse asked, "Do you have a card?" in case I have any other car troubles. 2 weeks later, I returned to Harrison's auto shop with a perfectly functioning Audi and a made-up concern about the air conditioning. Jake raised an eyebrow but checked it anyway. "Everything seems fine," he said. "But while you're here, I could improve your fuel efficiency if you'd like." That became our pattern. I would find excuses to bring my car in, and Jake would find ways to make it perform better. Our conversations grew longer and more personal with each visit. After my 4th visit in a month, Jake finally called me out. "Your car is running perfectly," he said with a slight smile. "Maybe we should just get coffee instead of pretending it needs work." That first real date took place at a small Ethiopian restaurant in a neighborhood I had never visited despite living in DC my entire life. Jake wore clean jeans and a button-down shirt, looking completely different from the mechanic I had grown accustomed to seeing. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. For the first time in years, I laughed without calculating how it would be perceived. I spoke without filtering my words. I felt like Geneva, not Senator Thompson's daughter. 3 weeks later, Jake invited me to Sunday dinner with his family. I was terrified, having never been to a normal family dinner. His parents' home in Brooklyn was modest but impeccably maintained, with a small front yard bursting with flowers. His sisters Melody and Diana welcomed me with genuine warmth. His father Lloyd, a retired postal worker, showed me his woodworking projects with pride. His mother Sandra enveloped me in a hug that felt foreign yet wonderful. "So you're the reason Jake's been walking around smiling like a fool," Sandra said, linking her arm through mine as she led me to the kitchen. "Come help me finish dinner. I want to hear all about you." That dinner was chaos compared to the silent, formal affairs of my childhood. Everyone talked at once. They teased each other mercilessly. They argued about politics, sports, and the best way to make potato salad. But underneath it all was an undeniable current of love. As Jake drove me home that night, I remained quiet, processing the experience. "Too much?" he asked, misinterpreting my silence. "No," I replied honestly, "it was perfect. They're perfect." He laughed. "They're loud and opinionated and completely embarrassing sometimes. But yeah, they're pretty great." "You're lucky," I said softly, thinking about the cold, strategic interactions that passed for family time in the Thompson household. Jake reached over and took my hand. "I know." As we pulled up to my apartment building, I realized with perfect clarity that I was falling in love with Jake Harrison, and that my parents would do everything in their power to stop it if they knew. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. For the first few months, I kept Jake separate from my Washington life. It wasn't shame, it was protection. I knew what would happen once my parents discovered him, and I wanted to preserve the pure happiness I had found for as long as possible. We created our own world together, exploring parts of DC I had never known existed despite living there my entire life. Jake showed me neighborhood festivals in Trinidad, hidden jazz clubs in Shaw, and community gardens in Anacostia. I introduced him to the quieter corners of the Phillips Collection and chamber music performances at the Kennedy Center. We each stepped into the other's world with curiosity rather than judgment. "You really never learned to change a tire?" Jake asked incredulously one Saturday afternoon. I shrugged. We always had drivers, or roadside assistants. That day, in an empty parking lot, he taught me to change a tire, check my oil, and jumpstart a battery. His patience was endless, never making me feel foolish for not knowing these basic skills. "Your turn," I told him the following weekend, dragging him to a gallery opening. I watched him study each painting, carefully forming his own opinions rather than parroting what others said. When a pretentious collector tried to impress us with jargon, Jake asked simple but insightful questions that revealed the man's shallow knowledge. Later, Jake pointed out his favorite pieces, explaining what drew him to them in ways that made me see them differently. "You're full of surprises," I said as we walked back to his truck. "So are you," he replied, squeezing my hand. Our first significant test as a couple came when I caught a terrible flu. I had always been alone when sick, with a housekeeper checking in occasionally at my mother's instruction. Jake, however, showed up at my apartment with homemade soup medicine and a stack of classic movies. "You'll get sick too," I protested weakly from my cocoon of blankets. "Probably," he agreed, settling beside me. "Worth it." He stayed for 3 days, working remotely from my living room between bringing me tea and checking my temperature. When I apologized for being terrible company, he kissed my forehead and said, "This is what people do for people they care about, Geneva. It's not complicated." Our first argument came shortly after, when I instinctively tried to pay for an expensive repair his truck needed. "I don't need your money," he said, voice tight. "I know you don't need it," I replied, frustrated. "I want to help because I care about you." "There's a difference between helping and fixing," he said. "I'm not a charity case." We didn't speak for 2 days, the longest we had gone without communication since meeting. When we finally talked, it was an honest conversation about class differences, independence, and what support really meant in a relationship. Unlike the conflict resolution I had witnessed in my parents' marriage, cold silences followed by tactical concessions, Jake and I emerged stronger with better understanding. Gradually, I began learning more about Jake's professional life beyond just fixing cars. He had developed several patents for fuel-efficient engine modifications that were gaining attention in the automotive world. His garage offered free repair services every third Saturday to low-income families. Local environmental groups consulted him on sustainable transportation initiatives. "Why didn't you tell me about your patents?" I asked after discovering them through a colleague who worked in green technology. Jake shrugged. "It never came up." "Jake, these are brilliant. You could be working for any major manufacturer. And wear a suit every day, sit in meetings instead of actually building things." He shook his head. "I've had offers. That life isn't for me." His lack of pretension, his contentment with doing meaningful work rather than chasing status, these qualities became more attractive to me than any pedigree or connection my parents valued. After 6 months of dating, we finally ventured into my professional world when I invited Jake to a colleague's wedding. I was nervous knowing that many guests would recognize the Thompson name and make assumptions. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked as we parked. "These people can be judgmental." Jake straightened his tie, the only one he owned. "Are you worried about what they'll think of me or what they'll tell your parents?" "Both," I admitted honestly. He kissed me softly. "If you're not ready, we can leave right now." "But Geneva, I'm not ashamed of who I am or what I do. And I hope you're not either." We stayed. Jake charmed my colleagues with his authenticity and intelligence. By the end of the night, my director was discussing potential collaboration on an eco-friendly transportation initiative for underserved communities. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. "I heard you brought a mechanic to the Whitfield Foundation wedding," she said without preamble. "Please tell me Barbara Miller was exaggerating." And just like that, my parallel worlds collided. "His name is Jake Harrison," I replied, heart pounding but voice steady. "And yes, he's a mechanic. He's also an inventor and environmental innovator." My mother's pause spoke volumes. "Well, I suppose everyone goes through a phase of rebellion. When you're ready to meet someone appropriate, the Carmichael's son just finished his surgical residency." I changed the subject, but the seed was planted. Over the following weeks, friends from political families expressed concern about my new relationship. Invitations to certain events mysteriously stopped arriving. My mother increased her calls, each one featuring a new eligible bachelor she wanted me to meet just as a friend. Through it all, Jake remained steady. "They haven't even met me," he said when I vented my frustration. "They're judging based on a job title. That says more about them than about me." Nearly a year after my car broke down outside his shop, Jake took me to a community cleanup project we had helped organize in his neighborhood. As we finished planting a new community garden, he led me to a bench under a flowering cherry tree. "I have something to ask you," he said, suddenly serious. My heart raced as he knelt and pulled out a small box. Inside wasn't a flashy diamond, but a vintage ring with delicate sapphires surrounding a modest center stone. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "She was the strongest woman I knew until I met you." His proposal was simple and heartfelt. I said yes. Immediately, tears streaming down my face, even as a voice in the back of my mind whispered that the real challenge was just beginning. We were about to declare war on the Thompson family expectations. And I knew from a lifetime of observation that my father never lost a political battle. But looking at Jake's face filled with love and hope, I decided some wars were worth fighting even if victory wasn't guaranteed. The engagement ring felt simultaneously weightless and impossibly heavy on my finger as I prepared for the monthly Thompson family dinner. Jake had offered to come with me, but I decided this first confrontation should happen alone. I needed to see their unfiltered reactions without worrying about protecting Jake from their inevitable cruelty. "I can handle it," I assured him over the phone as my Uber approached my parents' mansion. "Remember, I grew up navigating these waters. Just remember, they can only hurt you if you still want their approval," Jake said, his voice warm through the speaker. "Call me after, no matter how late." The Thompson family dining room had always felt more like a strategic war room than a place for family connection. The mahogany table stretched unnecessarily long for just 3 people with my father naturally at the head. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and silver serving dishes presented food that was chosen for impression rather than taste. "Geneva, darling, you look tired," my mother commented as our housekeeper Maria served the first course. "That foundation works you too hard for what they pay." Carlton Whitman mentioned his firm is looking for someone with your background. I smiled tightly. "I love my job, Mother." "Love doesn't pay for the lifestyle you're accustomed to," my father interjected, without looking up from his soup. Speaking of appropriate matches, Richard Dalton will be at the Congressman Turner's fundraiser next week. His hedge fund just closed a very impressive quarter. The familiar pressure built in my chest, the weight of their expectations colliding with my reality. I had rehearsed this moment countless times over the past week, but now that it had arrived, my carefully prepared words evaporated. "I won't be available for any setups," I said, finally, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm engaged." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's soup spoon froze midway to her mouth. My father slowly set down his water glass. "Engaged," my mother repeated, as if testing an unfamiliar word. "To whom? When did this happen?" I took a deep breath and extended my hand, showing my grandmother's sapphire ring. "His name is Jake Harrison. We've been together for nearly a year." My father's eyes narrowed. "Harrison. Not related to the Harrisons from Boston?" "No," I said. "Jake owns an auto repair shop in Northeast DC." My mother's spoon clattered against her bowl. "An auto repair. Geneva, is this some kind of joke?" "He's also an inventor," I continued, determined to get through my prepared points. "He holds several patents for eco-friendly engine modifications. He's brilliant and kind, and—" "Enough," my father interrupted, his voice cold. "This is completely unsuitable and you know it. Whatever rebellious phase you're going through needs to end now." "It's not a phase, Father. I love him and we're getting married in 6 months." My mother pressed her fingertips to her temples. "Do you have any idea what this would do to your father's position, to our family's standing? The daughter of Senator Thompson, marrying a grease monkey." The derisive term ignited something fierce within me. "Don't you dare speak about him that way. Jake has built something real with his own hands and mind. He helps people every day in tangible ways." "And what exactly do you think I do?" my father demanded, color rising in his face. "I create policy that affects millions of lives. You create policy that benefits your donors." I countered, speaking aloud thoughts I had kept silent for years. "When was the last time you visited the communities those policies actually impact?" My mother's face crumpled into tears. "How can you be so selfish? After everything we've sacrificed to give you the perfect life, the perfect opportunities." "Perfect for whom?" I asked quietly. "I never wanted this life." "You never asked what I wanted." B&E. My father's expression shifted from anger to calculation, a look I recognized from watching him handle political threats. "Geneva, be reasonable. Your trust fund has specific conditions. Your position at the foundation came through our connections. Are you prepared to give all that up for this?" "Infatuation?" The threat was clear and entirely expected. "Yes," I answered simply. "I am." The remainder of dinner passed in tense conversation with my parents, alternating between dismissing my relationship as temporary insanity and outlining all I would lose by pursuing it. By dessert, my mother had moved from tears to bargaining. "At least meet with Dr. Phillips," she pleaded, referring to their therapist friend. "Just to make sure you're thinking clearly." I agreed to one concession: they could meet Jake at a dinner the following week. Perhaps seeing him in person would help them understand my decision. That dinner proved even more disastrous. My father selected one of DC's most exclusive restaurants, clearly hoping to intimidate Jake with an environment where he wouldn't belong. Jake arrived in a new suit I hadn't seen before, not expensive but perfectly tailored. He maintained impeccable manners despite my father's increasingly condescending questions. "And what exactly are your prospects, Mr. Harrison?" my father asked while cutting his Wagyu steak. "I assume Geneva has explained the lifestyle she's accustomed to." "Geneva and I have discussed our finances openly," Jake replied evenly. "My business is doing well and my patent royalties provide additional income." "We'll be comfortable, Senator. even without your support." My mother gasped softly at his directness. My father's expression hardened. "Young man, you clearly have no idea what world you're stepping into," he said. "The Thompson name opens doors you can't even see. Geneva has responsibilities, connections, a legacy to uphold." "With all due respect," Sir Jake replied, "Geneva is brilliant, compassionate, and capable of making her own choices. That's what I love about her." I reached for his hand under the table, squeezing it in silent gratitude. The dinner ended early with my mother developing a sudden headache. In the restaurant foyer, my father pulled me aside. "End this now," he said in the same tone he used for political adversaries, "or consider your relationship with this family terminated." News of my engagement spread quickly through our extended family. Calls poured in from concerned relatives who had clearly spoken with my parents first. My conservative grandparents expressed disappointment. Cousins, who depended on my father's political connections, distanced themselves. Only my Aunt Judith, my father's younger sister, and the family rebel, who had married an artist against my grandfather's wishes, called with genuine congratulations. "They'll come around or they won't," she said pragmatically. "Either way, live your life, Geneva. I wasted too many years seeking approval that never came." A week later, my father's ultimatum became reality. My access to the family trust fund was restricted. The lease on my apartment held in my father's name would not be renewed. Several board members at my foundation received calls expressing concerns about my judgment. When I called my parents to confront them, my mother answered, "We're doing this for your own good," she insisted, her voice wavering. "This infatuation will pass, and you'll thank us for protecting you from a terrible mistake." "The only mistake was believing you ever cared about my happiness," I replied before hanging up. That night, in Jake's modest apartment, I cried for the family I was losing while simultaneously feeling a strange sense of freedom. Jake held me without trying to fix everything, a concept foreign to the Thompson approach of solving problems through power and money. "We'll figure it out," he promised. "Together." Looking into his eyes, I believed him. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in my life, it would be mine. Planning a wedding while under siege from your own family creates a unique kind of stress. Jake and I decided on a meaningful but modest ceremony in the community garden. We had helped restore the same place where he had proposed. His parents insisted on contributing what they could, despite our protests. "We've been saving for both our girls' weddings since they were born," Lloyd Harrison explained gruffly. "Just because Melody eloped doesn't mean that money should go to waste." I found unexpected joy in the practical aspects of planning, choosing invitations that reflected our values rather than impressing society, selecting a menu from a local woman-owned catering company, asking Jake's sister Diana to be my maid of honor. These decisions made without my mother's overbearing influence felt genuinely mine for the first time. The financial adjustments were harder. My salary at the foundation was enough to live on, but not in the style I had taken for granted. I moved from my luxury apartment to Jake's one-bedroom in Brooklyn. We started hunting for an affordable house in the neighborhoods my parents would never visit. "It's actually nice to see where our money goes," I admitted while reviewing our joint budget. "I never even looked at price tags before." Jake smiled. "Welcome to how 99% of the world lives, Thompson." My father's retaliatory actions escalated as our wedding date approached. First came the whispered rumors in political circles that Senator Thompson's daughter was having some kind of breakdown. Then subtle pressure on the foundation's major donors questioning the organization's judgment. My director, Thomas Wheeler, called me into his office one Wednesday afternoon. "Geneva, you know I value your work," he began uncomfortably. "But several board members have expressed concerns about recent developments in your personal life." I straightened my spine. "My personal life has no bearing on my professional capabilities, Thomas." "I agree completely," he assured me quickly. "But the reality is, we depend on certain relationships for funding. Your father has significant influence." "Are you firing me?" I asked directly. Thomas looked genuinely distressed. "No, absolutely not. I'm just suggesting maybe a temporary position change, something less visible until this blows over." I considered my options. Pride demanded I quit immediately. Practicality reminded me, that we needed my income more than ever. "I'll consider it," I said, finally buying myself time to job hunt. My mother's tactics were less direct but equally damaging. She called our wedding venue claiming to be my assistant, attempting to cancel our reservation. She reached out to my college friends with tearful stories about my concerning behavior and troubling relationship choices. 3 former friends staged an intervention over coffee, clearly coached by Eleanor Thompson herself. "Geneva, we're worried about you," began Stephanie, who I hadn't spoken to in months. "Making such dramatic life changes so quickly isn't like you." "Actually, making my own choices isn't like the old me," I corrected her. "But it's exactly like the person I'm becoming." The media interest caught us by surprise. A political blog picked up the story of Senator Thompson's daughter slumming it with a mechanic. A gossip columnist speculated about family drama after noticing my parents' absence from foundation events I attended. Soon photographers occasionally followed us, hoping to catch glimpses of the senator's rebellious daughter. Jake handled the unwanted attention with remarkable grace. "They're just doing their jobs," he said after we were photographed grocery shopping. "It'll die down once they realize we're actually pretty boring." The direct interference came 3 weeks before our wedding. Jake received a visit at his shop from Martin Graves, my father's longtime associate and fixer. Mr. Harrison Graves said, placing a manila envelope on Jake's desk. "Senator Thompson recognizes your attachment to his daughter. He's prepared to acknowledge your relationship has certain value to you." Inside the envelope was a check for $100,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. Jake called me immediately after showing Graves the door. "Your father tried to buy me off," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Apparently I'm worth exactly $100,000 to him." That night I called my father for the first time in weeks. "How dare you?" I said when he answered. "How dare you try to bribe the man I love to leave me?" "Geneva," he replied calmly, "I'm simply trying to protect you from a fortune hunter. If he truly cared for you, money wouldn't matter." "You're right about one thing," I shot back. "Money doesn't matter to Jake. That's why he showed your man the door. It's you who can't imagine a relationship not based on advantage." The line went silent for a moment. "You've always been headstrong, Geneva, but this defiance has gone too far. There will be consequences." "There already have been," I replied. "I've lost my family." "What else can you take?" The answer came a few days later when Jake discovered someone had been investigating his background. A former employee mentioned being questioned about Jake's business practices. His high school girlfriend received calls about their relationship history. Even his landlord was approached about his payment history. "They're looking for dirt," Jake said, running his hands through his hair. "What happens when they don't find any?" "They'll fabricate something," I answered, knowing exactly how Washington operated. "Or they'll twist something innocent into something sinister." Jake looked troubled. "I don't care what they do to me, but I hate what this is doing to you. Maybe we should postpone, give everyone time to calm down." I took his face in my hands. "That's exactly what they want. If we delay, they win. Is that what you want?" "I want you to be happy," he said simply. "I want to marry you without all this drama and pain." "I am happy," I insisted. "Happier than I've ever been despite everything. Don't let them take that from us." A surprising ally emerged a week before the wedding. Walter Kingsley, my father's former Senate colleague who had retired the previous year, reached out through my foundation email. "Geneva, you don't know me well," his message began, "but I've followed the situation with your father. 30 years ago, my family disowned me for marrying a divorced woman with a child. Best decision I ever made, though it took a decade for my parents to come around. I'd be honored to attend your wedding if you'll have me." Walter wasn't just offering moral support. As former chairman of the Environmental Protection Committee, he had connections to the National Environmental Innovation Foundation, which took immediate interest in Jake's patents. As the wedding date approached, we sent formal invitations to my parents despite everything. The RSVP deadline came and went with no response. I told myself I had expected nothing else, but the confirmation of their absence still stung. "We don't need them," Diana assured me during the final dress fitting. "You've got a new family now." Looking at my reflection wearing a simple but elegant dress rather than the extravagant gown my mother would have insisted on, I realized Diana was right. The Thompson definition of family had always been about obligation and appearance. The Harrison definition was about love and support. It wasn't hard to choose between them. I woke up on my wedding day in Diana's guest room, having stayed there the night before while Jake remained at our apartment. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I felt surprisingly calm. Whatever storms my parents had created today belonged to Jake and me. Diana brought coffee and toast to the bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the bed like we were teenagers at a sleepover. "Nervous?" she asked. "Strangely, no," I replied honestly. "This feels like the first completely right decision I've ever made." Melody arrived soon after bringing mimosas, and their mother Sandra, who carried a small velvet box. "Something borrowed," Sandra explained, opening it to reveal a delicate pearl hairpin. "My mother wore it at her wedding, and so did I." The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, throat tight with emotion. "Families are chosen, not just born into," Sandra said, squeezing my hand. "We chose you the moment Jake brought you home." As Diana arranged my hair and Melody helped with my makeup, a delivery arrived from Aunt Judith, my grandmother's antique lace handkerchief, with a note reading simply, "She would have approved of a woman who thinks for herself." The community garden had been transformed for the ceremony. White chairs lined a grassy aisle leading to an arbor covered in climbing roses. Jake had spent weeks ensuring every plant was at its peak bloom for today. Potted herbs served as centerpieces on reception tables to be donated to the community kitchen afterward. As I prepared to walk down the aisle alone, having declined Lloyd's gentle offer to step in for my father, I paused at the garden entrance, scanning the gathered guests. Jake's large extended family filled one side. My significantly smaller contingent occupied just a few rows on the other. Then I noticed several faces I hadn't expected. 3 of my father's Senate colleagues sat in the back row. My mother's friend Barbara Miller, who had first reported our relationship, was there with her husband. Most surprisingly, at least 10 members of the environmental activism community, where Jake was increasingly respected, had come. But the empty front row seats reserved for my parents remained conspicuously vacant, a visual reminder of their absence. Jake waited under the arbor, more handsome than I had ever seen him in his new suit. His eyes never left mine as I walked toward him, and in that moment, the empty seats ceased to matter. This man who loved me for myself, not for what I represented, was my family now. Our vows were personal and honest. Jake promised to support my dreams as fiercely as I had defended our relationship. I promised to remember the courage and clarity I had found through loving him. When the pastor pronounced us husband and wife, the cheer from our guests seemed to lift the very air around us. During the reception, I was pulled aside by Walter Kingsley, the former senator who had reached out to us. "I brought someone I think you both should meet," he said, introducing us to Catherine Martinez, director of the National Environmental Innovation Foundation. "Your husband's work is impressive," she told me. "We've been following his patents for some time. When Walter mentioned your wedding, I had to come see the man behind the innovations myself." As Catherine and Jake discussed potential collaboration, I noticed our wedding photographer Gabriella capturing the moment. She had been documenting everything with an artistic eye rather than the formal portraits my mother would have insisted upon. Later during toasts, Jake's best friend Marcus revealed something I hadn't known. Jake turned down a full scholarship to MIT, he announced to surprised murmurs. Said he learned better by doing than by sitting in classrooms. Looks like he was right, considering he's invented engine modifications that engineers with fancy degrees couldn't figure out. I turned to Jake, surprised. "You never told me that." He shrugged, embarrassed by the attention. It wasn't the right path for me. The most unexpected moment came when Catherine Martinez asked for everyone's attention. "The foundation doesn't usually make announcements at personal events," she began, "but this seems fitting. We're awarding Harrison Auto Shop our annual Environmental Innovation Grant to expand your eco-modification program to low-income communities across the district." Jake stood shocked as Catherine presented him with a commemorative plaque. The foundation's grant would transform his small operation into a significant environmental initiative. As cameras flashed, capturing his surprised expression, I felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly overwhelmed me. Our first dance as husband and wife took place under string lights as the sun set over the garden. "Any regrets?" Jake whispered as we swayed to the music. "Not a single one," I replied truthfully. As the evening wound down, I experienced a moment of melancholy thinking of my absent parents. Jake noticed, as he always did. "They missed something beautiful today," he said gently. "That's their loss, not yours." I nodded, knowing he was right, but still feeling the ache of their rejection. "I just wish they could have seen what I see in you." "Maybe someday," he offered. "And if not, we'll be okay anyway." After a perfect day, we left for a modest honeymoon on North Carolina's Outer Banks, far from Washington's scrutiny and politics. It was during that peaceful week that Gabriella sent us the first batch of wedding photos. They were stunning, capturing not just the ceremony but the genuine emotions of the day. The love between Jake and me, the warmth of his family embracing me, the surprising support from unexpected allies. One photo in particular caught my attention. Jake receiving the environmental award, looking simultaneously humble and proud. Behind him stood Walter Kingsley and Catherine Martinez, both with expressions of genuine respect. The plaque clearly showed the foundation's prestigious logo and the substantial grant amount. An idea formed as I stared at the image. "They should see this," I said to Jake, showing him the photo. He studied it thoughtfully. "Are you sure?" "They thought they were protecting me from someone beneath me," I explained. "They should know who you really are." With Jake's agreement, I sent the photo to both my parents' phones with a simple message, "What you missed." Then we turned off our phones and enjoyed our last day of honeymoon peace before returning to our new life together. We returned from our honeymoon to an apartment overflowing with ignored messages. My phone showed 27 missed calls from my mother, 15 from my father, and numerous voicemails growing increasingly desperate in tone. "Geneva, call us immediately," my father's first message demanded. "Darling, there's been a misunderstanding," my mother pleaded in another. "We need to discuss this development," said the third. "It changes things." I looked at Jake, who raised an eyebrow. Apparently, one photo was worth more than all our words, he observed. The photo had revealed what my parents had refused to see: Jake receiving the National Environmental Innovation Foundation's prestigious grant, with former Senator Kingsley and Director Martinez clearly showing their respect. The award recognized Jake's patents for eco-friendly engine modifications that reduced emissions from older vehicles by up to 40%, innovations that major manufacturers were now licensing. The morning after our return, my mother appeared unannounced at our apartment door, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Geneva," she said, trying to embrace me. I stepped back, maintaining distance. "Mother, this is unexpected." Her eyes darted around our modest apartment, taking in the moving boxes, still unpacked. "We've been trying to reach you. That photo. Why didn't you tell us about Jake's work?" "I tried," I replied evenly. "You and Father weren't interested in anything beyond his job title." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Well, how were we to know? You said he was a mechanic." "He is a mechanic," I confirmed. "He's also an inventor, a business owner, and an environmental innovator. None of which should matter, because what should have been important was that I love him and he makes me happy." My mother's expression shifted rapidly between contrition and calculation. "Your father and I would like to have dinner with both of you. To start fresh." I glanced at Jake, who had remained silent during this exchange. He nodded slightly, leaving the decision to me. "We'll think about it," I said. "I'll call you." After she left, Jake pulled me into a hug. "You okay?" "No," I admitted. "I'm angry that it took external validation for them to see your worth. If you hadn't won that grant, they'd still be treating you like you were beneath me." "People like your parents understand success in very specific terms," Jake said thoughtfully. "Maybe this is just the language they can comprehend." We agreed to meet my parents at a neutral restaurant, not the exclusive club my father suggested, but not Jake's favorite neighborhood diner either. When we arrived, they were already seated, my father checking his watch impatiently. "Geneva, Jake," he greeted with forced warmth, standing to shake Jake's hand. "Congratulations on your award. Walter Kingsley speaks very highly of your work." "Thank you, Senator," Jake replied politely. My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. "The wedding photos look lovely, darling. I wish we could have been there." "You could have been," I pointed out. "You chose not to come." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only when the waiter arrived to take our orders. Once alone again, my father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we were hasty in our assessment of your relationship." Jake's environmental work is actually quite aligned with the new energy initiative I'm supporting in the Senate. I couldn't help but laugh. Fascinating how his work suddenly has merit now that you've found a way to connect it to your political agenda. Geneva, my mother chided. Your father is trying to make amends. No, I corrected her. He's trying to save face and possibly capitalize on Jake's success. There's a difference. My father's expression hardened. You've become quite cynical. I've become honest, I countered. Something this family has never valued. Jake gently touched my arm, a reminder of our agreed approach. We had decided before this dinner that burning bridges completely served no purpose, but neither would we pretend the past months hadn't happened. Senator Mrs. Thompson, Jake said evenly. I appreciate that you're reaching out. Geneva and I are building our life together with or without your approval. But we'd prefer it to be with some kind of relationship for Geneva's sake. My father studied Jake with new eyes. What exactly are you proposing? Boundaries, I interjected. If you want to be part of our lives, there are conditions. No more interference, no more judgments, no more attempts to control my choices. And an apology, Jake added quietly. A real one, not just because my name is suddenly valuable to you. My parents exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with these terms. My mother spoke first. We were worried about you, Geneva. We only wanted what was best. No, I corrected gently. You wanted what looked best. There's a difference. The remainder of dinner progressed with cautious conversation. My parents asked about Jake's patents, his plans for the grant money, our housing search. They offered connections and resources that we mostly declined. As we prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. The trust fund restrictions can be lifted, he said, as if offering a great concession. Now that we understand the situation better? Keep it, I replied. We're doing fine on our own. His surprise was evident. Don't be stubborn out of pride, Geneva. That money is your birthright. Maybe someday, I said. When I'm confident, it doesn't come with invisible strings. Jake and I settled into married life with surprising ease. We found a modest but charming house in Brooklyn, close to his shop, which was expanding into the Jake Harrison Eco-Innovation Center thanks to the foundation grant. My work at the Whitfield Foundation continued, though I had quietly begun job searching after the pressure my father had applied. An unexpected opportunity came through Catherine Martinez, who offered me a position leading community outreach for the Environmental Innovation Foundation. The role aligned perfectly with my skills and values, and the foundation's independence from political influence meant my father's connections couldn't threaten my position. Our relationship with my parents evolved slowly. There were awkward dinners and tentative holiday gatherings. My mother made genuine efforts visiting our new home and even attending the opening of Jake's expanded center. My father's acceptance was more calculated, especially after Jake's innovations received national press coverage, but it was progress nonetheless. 1 year after our wedding, we hosted a housewarming party in our new home. Jake's large, boisterous family mingled with my smaller circle of true friends. My parents attended briefly, still uncomfortable in settings they couldn't control, but making an effort that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. As I watched Jake laughing with his father and mine, an unlikely grouping, I reflected on the journey. We had created a life that honored both our backgrounds while breaking free from expectations that didn't serve us. We had found success on our own terms, measured not by status or appearances, but by meaningful work and authentic relationships. The road hadn't been easy, and some wounds were still healing. But standing in our modest home, surrounded by people who valued us for who we were rather than what we represented, I knew we had built something real and lasting, something far more valuable than the golden cage I had escaped. Penny for your thoughts, Jake said, slipping his arm around my waist. Just thinking about how sometimes the breakdown of an engine can lead to exactly where you need to go, I replied, leaning into his embrace. He smiled, understanding as always. Best wrong turn I ever took. Looking back at that moment when my Audi sputtered to a stop near Harrison's auto shop, I couldn't have imagined where that path would lead. But I wouldn't change a single step of the journey. Have you ever had to stand up for your relationship against family disapproval, or discovered that someone was much more than they initially appeared? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of finding courage to choose your own path resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about standing your ground and discovering what truly matters. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that sometimes the most beautiful destinations come after the most challenging journeys. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to follow their heart despite opposition.